Welcome to the Lessons from the Leap podcast, where we showcase visionary entrepreneurs and leaders, sharing their incredible journeys and inspiring stories. Let's dive into the show.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons from the Leap. I'm your host, Ghazenfer Mansoor. On this show, I get to sit down with entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders to talk about the bold decisions, pivotal moments, and innovative ideas that shaped their journey. This episode is brought to you by Technology Rivers. At Technology Rivers, we bring innovation through technology and AI to solve real-world industry problems. We do it in two ways. First, by helping businesses streamline and automate their operations. And second, by partnering with startup founders, entrepreneurs, and business owners, create innovative software products from SaaS platforms to web and mobile app. A big part of our focus is in the healthcare, where we help health tech companies to build secure, HIPAA-compliant applications. If you'd like to learn more or work with us, head over to technologyrivers.com and tell us about your project. Today's guest is Phil Neal. Phil is a serial entrepreneur, strategic growth advisor, and investor with a proven record of scaling businesses to 8-figure exits. With over 15 years of experience, he has built and scaled multiple businesses across diverse industries, achieving 8-figure exit with his first venture, where he generated $70 million in a founder-led sales and $30 million EBITDA, navigated complex international markets, and formed strategic partnerships with Fortune 500 companies. Phil is a power connector, part strategic visionary, and wholly dedicated to shaping the future of deep tech. He brings expertise in deep tech, AI, aerospace, and international market, and help countless founders structure revenue strategies, secure partnerships, navigate mergers and acquisition. Phil, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you on Lessons from the Leap. Just start with your background, where you from, where you grew up. Just give us a brief, and then we'll talk about your journey to that 70 million that we have been listening a lot.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. My journey was pretty much covered in your intro, but what I could say is I'm a French Canadian. I live in the Quebec, Canada. I was born and raised here. Most of my business now is in the United States or the rest of Canada, and a little bit, everywhere in the world. At the end of the day, mostly in Thailand. So I really appreciate doing international business development. My story is that I became an entrepreneur through this first business that I pivoted and grew to 70 million before exiting. And then I became a serial entrepreneur and a venture capitalist. Eventually, through building a technology company, I discovered something that changed what I wanted to do as an entrepreneur, my mission. Before, I always wanted to master the process, gain the skills, gain the leverage, so that I could create companies following a proven process so that I can have impact. Once I failed with my technology company because of founder burnout, then I started to pay a lot of more attention on the inner journey of entrepreneurship. And today I'm leading a new company that I call the Founder's Compass, which focuses on mapping out that inner journey and building Founder Readiness, so that we build a world where founders won't break, and we can actually deliver the impact we always inspired to deliver.
Cool. So your company, Nubex Medical.
Yes.
So you grew to 70 million. What was the secret sauce? Like that was enormous, that high growth in such a short time.
Yes.
Is there anything you can share with our audience?
For sure. Absolutely. So this was my second venture. The first one doesn't really count. It was a business where I was trying to build a website for a social mission-driven company, and I realized I don't know enough. I have been in business development for almost 7-8 years with big companies, and I still didn't have enough understanding of entrepreneurship to do it on my own. So I partnered with these guys part-time, right? We were 4 partners, all equal shares, all just doing the work, acting as a service company, as a purchasing department for local health center. We called ourselves EMD2, which became Neobex after the pivot. And what happened is just me and the accountant was really actually working in the company. Most of us were kind of just, meeting once in a while to decide. And we were getting to a point where it was a lot of work for very little margin, but we were growing steadily. And so we kept pushing through. We had an internal agreement that made sense. And when COVID hit, we almost went bankrupt because we couldn't buy any more supplies. We couldn't act as a distributor purchasing department for these local health centers. We were put on allocation, so we couldn't order more than the average of the last 12 months of our purchases because the manufacturers wanted to focus on making larger margins to the highest bidder and to the government. So because we had bootstrapped the company, we didn't have a ton of cash on hand. We couldn't gamble buying an inventory, taking the risk, and we didn't have any knowledge on how to import. How we were able to scale was that I saw that everybody was rushing into medical mask, but I also understood that they were easy to copy. And having been for the past year or so in the medical supply space, I was fortunate enough to see that another medical disposal was very popular was nitrile glove. And this was much harder to copy. You cannot produce nitrile in your backyard, right? So I decided to try and niche down on nitrile glove. I was able to make my way to speaking to a buyer at the government side, which, educated me on the process of RFQ, public tender, and I was able to negotiate my way into a first contract, which became the new positioning of our company. And that first contract was a crazy story. I can get into more details, but in a nutshell, the pivot really was the way forward to scaling this company, because that first contract became a $17 million contract, a $35 million contract. It became a contract with Sacramento County in California, HealthPro, and we just scaled following the demand.
Cool. Absolutely. I think finding the niche is key, and I think whatever you found in that helped you grew that fast, that's amazing. I think that's the harder part. How do you find that? And you nailed it. So congratulations. So you talk about the entrepreneurial shadow. Can you walk us through a time when you personally faced this, and how do you overcame it?
Yes. So this is something that took me almost, I guess, 5 years to figure out. It wasn't something I understood at the time. So I approached it from a reflective lens more than something that I knew along the way. But now that I have that clarity, I can see how it affected both my luck and misfortune and my outcomes. And so when I first scaled that business, for example, immediately we fell into a founder conflict. And that founder conflict destroyed our leadership. We couldn't make decision because of it. And we made mistakes that led to a $5 million fraud. We lost a big contract. We almost went bankrupt after scaling that high. And so a bunch of crazy stories, right? And the core of it was we'd never monitor our state of entrepreneurial shadow. And if you want to understand the entrepreneurial shadow, the shadow of entrepreneurship, you have to start with simplifying the battlefield of emotions that you have to deal with as an entrepreneur. So we all know emotional intelligence is important, social intelligence, and there's 1,000 emotion. For entrepreneurs, I believe we're visited by the same storm over and over, and I call that the shadow of entrepreneurship, which is uncertainty, fear, and unworthiness. So feeling of imposter syndrome, fear of failure, and uncertainty over your direction, your decisions. And these three emotions, if they're not seen, if you don't know how to navigate them, create reactivity, which is the first push on the domino of startup failure, which is losing capacity to sustain decision quality. So if I go back to my story of the conflict, well, unworthiness was a big underlying narrative that we never resurfaced. My partners felt like they needed to become successful entrepreneurs and build a big sustainable business that would outlive them if they were to be worthy of their identity that they were chasing. And so they were leaning towards immediately structuring the business, getting treating it as if it was a real business, but it wasn't yet. It was just a system that was working during a crisis time, and the risk was enormous. And if you want to crystallize a system in a market that is volatile and changing every 2 months with growing organized crime presence, making everything more complex, you should not take too much risk of crystallizing your processes, right? There's a time for flexibility and a time for stabilization. And so because they didn't feel like they would be, that was a big need for them, we overextended into buying too much inventory, which when we lost the $300 million contract later, well, we had paid with money that was due for income tax. So we were in big trouble. We had to convince a full refund of 1 million boxes of glove from one manufacturer just to survive and get a chance to. And we ended up having a sustainable business, and it's still in business right now, 5 years later. But we pulled it off by, I don't know the expression in English, but I guess the hair, it was pretty close. So uncertainty affected the way we were discussing. One of the other symptoms of how unworthiness, manifested was we had a physician in the group, and for him, he had always been on a pedestal. So he was always seen as high status, right? And now that he didn't really understand what was happening, that I was mostly me on the spotlight, he was taking it really badly. And so he wanted to attack my sense of worth so that he would regain that prestige, right? And so these underlying emotions drive the narratives that manifest as symptoms of founder conflict, missing product market fit, all these misalignment that you would read in a Harvard Business Review report are just symptoms of a deeper root cause, is what I understood through many repetition of not seeing that. And so that's an example of unworthiness. And if I can talk about myself, and then I can stop there because I know I talk a lot, but because of that conflict, my own sense of worth was really triggered. And that all need to prove myself made me fail to reach the crossroad of transformation after my exit, which I should have taken and become a full-fledged investor. But because I still felt I had something to prove to myself, I overstretched myself as a serial entrepreneur, and then began, starting buying. I had Irish pubs in Thailand. I have a construction company in Thailand. I have almost invested in a skateboard company. I've done a bunch of different things that all had barriers to entry, all had logical reason to kind of, okay, that might make sense. And I had money, so I could stomach the risk. But because it came from an emotional need more than anything else, and I didn't understand that, well, the second I stepped into uncertainty or fear, because early startup, that's the day-to-day of an early stage company, then everything turned to fire, right? So that is what I mean by the entrepreneurial shadow, is when these emotions come and visit us. And if we don't see them, we slowly move from uncertainty to fear to a sense that, hey, maybe I wasn't even cut out from the start. And then we approach the crossroad of failure, the failure zone of entrepreneurship.
Well, these are really good insights. I think I'm sure the listeners will take some benefits out of this, and as people are working on their entrepreneurship journey. So one thing that I noticed, like many founders struggle with, including myself, struggle with knowing when to pivot versus when to persist. How do you know the difference between a challenge to overcome and a sign to change the direction?
So I don't think there's a clear-cut formula. You can have formulas per industry that are more clear-cut, like if there certain metrics fall into a certain threshold, it could be an indicator. But ultimately, I think it has to do with intuition, intuitive attunement, and maintaining your mental clarity so that you can actually feel that intuitive whisper and not confuse it with a fear response. If I go back to my first pivot, I could feel like there was something to explore in gloves. I didn't know for sure. I just felt it. And so I took action and taken little experimentation steps into having conversation to gather new data that I couldn't read anywhere. Because of course, nothing online or in any database or in any CMS would let me know, business intelligence software or anything like that would let me know where I should pivot in that context. It would have just told me to pull the plug. But because I felt that whisper without knowing it was a whisper of intuition, and I took action, I could clarify that and then slowly open my eyes to the path that I should take. But it takes a little bit of aimless courage to test things out until you find something that has potential to stick.
Cool. What's something most founder get completely wrong about scaling internationally? Because that's where you have a bit unique, because obviously within the United States, within the country, rules are different. As you go international, things
Yeah.
are different. How do you see those difference?
Also, I've approached it through bridges of trust. There's many. It is way more risky because you don't control everything, right? So if you compare a new entrepreneur to a seasoned entrepreneur, the new entrepreneur is in the unknown all the time. The experienced entrepreneur has stable ground in the quicksand of entrepreneurship that he can walk on. Well, if you step outside your known territory, you go back to the quicksand in many, many different ways. And now that I've been through many countries, I can see some of the patterns that I should be looking into, but it is still outside my comfort zone and my control. And so how you read people, how you can manage your risk, this is something that people underestimate. They think that they can find one or two advisors and they're going to take care of it for them. But the truth is, you will have to expand the solid ground that you can walk on by flying over there once in a while, validating, getting your own knowledge and experience and understanding, and as well rely on trusted source and build these scaffolding of trust slowly so that when you take a decisive action, you understand the risk you're taking and you can minimize the downside. So I would say in a nutshell that the risk management is what people underestimate.
Oh, totally agree. And with Technology Rivers, we're also in 6 countries. And you talked about like flying there. So I noted that is the most important, because no matter, like, English is just the one criteria. Once people know your language, that's not enough. So every culture is different and people are saying one thing, but the meaning may be different.
Yeah.
Once you start spending some time, you sit down with those people, that's the only time. I grew up in Pakistan and my team is there. But even then, with 27 years in the US, that gap is created. Now I go back, I need to still spend time with the team to really bring them to get to know what they are
Yeah.
thinking. So yes, there is
Absolutely.
less difference compared to somebody totally new, but it's still there's a huge gap that needs to be filled.
Absolutely. And so there's layers, right? There's the cultural layers that you need to get a sense of understanding yourself through your own lived experience and your lens to calibrate. But then you also need to put the trusted people in that context. And so it's more than just understanding someone, it's understanding that trusted local source within the context of that new culture that you get to understand. So there's a lot of it's time, it's paying attention, it's being humble and being careful. Yeah.
So as you're working on a founder campus and you work with many founders, uh, in your opinion, what's one question every founder should ask themselves, but most never do?
Well, I think most founders don't understand themselves well enough and they end up, or the entrepreneurial journey well enough so that they jump in it, and successful or not, they have crisis, either of purpose or of identity at some point. And so if you're clear over who you are, why you want to be an entrepreneur, why this specific venture, you have a level of perspective that really empowers you throughout your journey. And these are very important questions to ask yourself, and to ask yourself again and again, once in a while, just so that you remain clear, because the one superpower of entrepreneurship is alignment.
True. Yeah, that's a good reminder to ask again and again. You know how coaches tell us, like, whatever your goal, those should be at your bathroom mirror, because it's the reminder that makes you do things again. Like, otherwise you keep forgetting, you just get lazy, or you're just not doing it. So,
Yeah, and more than the goals, the reason why. So it's really, because I think, if you look at Simon Sinek, he made it popular. Start with why, and I think the who, the how, and the what. All right, people question the why of their business. They might ask themselves why they want to be an entrepreneur, and maybe they're going to go deeper to, then I want to make money, or I want to be free. Maybe there's going to be a deeper understanding. But most people stop very early in the process, and they don't really think about who they want to be. They don't really want to think about, how is this making my life meaningful or not, and so at some point, you can die at any point. You're like, entrepreneurship is a hero journey. It can give you a better understanding of yourself, a chance to transform into something, a better version of yourself, if you will, but not necessarily in a growth path, but in a wisdom sense. And so there's a lot of treasures in entrepreneurship that can also be poison if you have ignorance instead of self-awareness.
cool. And you mentioned that the most expensive mistake looked like smart decisions at the time. Can you elaborate on that?
So I can talk about the $5 million scam that I was a victim of. So it was just after I made a partial exit. So I scaled 70 million. I had a founder conflict. I decided to sell part of my shares as a way to solve the conflict. So it's a long story, but all that to remind you that the founder conflict disrupted our capacity to make decisions. And so my partners wanted us to grow the company sustainably. We had hit the maximum that we could buy from China. And so we had to look outside of China. I first looked at Thailand because my now business partner, Matt, had villas over there. And I didn't know him at the time, but he was the husband of my former colleague when I was at the university selling cell phone, my first sales job. And so I explored through my limited contact network and eventually reached the limit of that as well. And so, but we had begun a sales campaign to gather customers that we had the potential to keep after the crisis through an hypothetical business model that we thought we would have a product market fit that would sustain itself beyond the crisis, right? And so we had orders. We had begun talking with an agent that had contacts in Indonesia that could sell us the products, and it seemed like a very good idea. We would grow the business, it would be stable, we would make more money, and then that channel was established by bridges of trust from people before COVID that were in the business. We had sent people on the ground, not us. Mistake number one. Just people that we had paid. We had a third-party inspection, all of the things that we should do on paper that looked like a smart thing, but we missed the sophistication of organized crime, and we got sold. It's to this day, it's not clear if they were all on it or some were on it, but the first loss we had was fake charter plane, and the charter plane company blame the distributor for not releasing the bills of lading, and then vice versa. And a year later, we realized, well, once we finally received the containers, they were empty. So it was just a big scam. It took us 11 months to figure it all out, and it cost a lot of money. But it looked like a good idea. It looked like we were doing the right things. But it was motivated by unworthiness that disrupted our sense of risk and our logic, and it led to a terrible outcome.
Cool. So one last question. So you have served as a judge for competition like GSCA, where focus isn't just a business, but on a founder as a person as well.
Yes.
From your perspective, what do young founders need most right now? And then if you want to tie in to your like as how you look at those founders when you're investing in those businesses.
I think, well, so young founders need more knowledge about the inner journey. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be doing that company. I think that's a big gap. That's the biggest gap there is at all levels of experience. But I think that uncertainty and expectations, and it has all to do with the inner journey and understanding what to expect and where are the traps. It is very important. And then not becoming puppets to the idols of the data tyranny, to the idols of the hustle culture, to the idols of everything is as simple as a playbook, because what starts like a side hustle and can rapidly become an entrepreneurial endeavor, and that's a whole different beast. It's a whole different beast from business. It's a whole different beast from a sideline. So when I look at founders, I look at their founder readiness from the sense that do they have the capacity to sustain decision quality because they have the maturity and the perspective to understand their state, to understand how they make decisions? Do they understand their thinking patterns? Do they understand their biases? Can they properly assess risk? Do they understand what leverage is, how to scan for opportunities that make sense, how to filter them? Can they have a strategic thinking process that also takes into factor future bottlenecks? Are they able to make bets that minimize the downsides but has exponential upside potentially? Do they understand that grit is more than just persevering until you're burnt out? That you need cadence, integrity, that your vitality is important because decision fatigue does exist, and a bad decision costs you way more than 1,000, rushed. A bad decision costs you way more than anything else at the end of the day, because the more you grow, the more power your decision hold, and especially as you have to cross certain crossroad of transformation, like moving from the founder-led sales to being a leader and hiring a team and being in charge of alignment. If you make bad decision, they ripple all over the structure, and that costs a lot of money. And this is often how your company is going to fail. And so as a founder, you need both. You need the skills to understand the growth stage and the rules and the milestones so that you have priority sharpness and focus for the business side. And you need to have the emotional strength underneath so that you can know if ChatGPT is telling you something you should not pay attention to right now, but that internal compass, that filter.
I think, yeah, it's a good entrepreneurial tips for people also who are looking for investment in their business, for sure. So we've been talking to Phil Neal, who has shared such powerful insight from his journey today. Phil, where can people learn more about you, about Founders Campus, and the work you have been doing with the entrepreneurs?
So we have the Founder Readiness Institute that does research on the founder journey. We produce the Founder Readiness Assessment that we've just released. So I would encourage you to go to founderscompass.com and take the free assessment. It's free at the moment. It's going to be free for a few months at the very least, and ideally forever. It's just not decided. And then if you want to improve the founder readiness, we have a mastermind beginning next year, which will be for sale on our website.
Cool. Is there a name for the mastermind? Or is the information already on the website? Or
it's being up. Well, I don't know when this is going to be published, but it's going to be released in October.
Okay, so we'll make sure to include in the podcast description when we release it. Cool.
Perfect.
Thanks, Phil. Okay. Thanks for your time today. We're glad to have you on our podcast, Lessons from the Leap.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Ghazenfer.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lessons from the Leap podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll catch you next time.